Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to the third part of my Spider-Man marathon. Joined by, I wish I could call you Ryan Boy, but that doesn't roll off the tongue very well. Just Ryan from Kaiju Network.
Hey, it's Ryan Boy.
Joining me once again, no sponsor from him, unfortunately.
Poland Springs, I guess.
Today, me and Ryan will be discussing the kind of much maligned third was what flavor?
It's like some chicken seasoning shit.
Okay, cool. That makes me hungry.
This is our sponsor. I don't even know the brand.
The third and final installment of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, Spider-Man 3 from 2007. Real quick, what is your history with part 2, but then in detail more, go for Spider-Man 3?
I honestly don't remember my history with part 2 as much as I do part 1. I believe my first experience was seeing it on DVD.
Mine too.
And, you know, I rewatched it over the years, mainly on DVD. Because I believe the DVD we have of Spider-Man 1 is a pirated DVD. So 2 is an actual official release. 3 is a weird one because 3 came out when I was like a conscious human. But I don't actually remember it coming out. I remember watching it on TV. So like not even a DVD or anything. Like it was just on TV. So it must have been like 2008 or something like that. And I remember the first time I watched it, what stood out to me was A, Venom scared the shit out of me. And B, was Peter dancing.
Oh boy, we'll get into that later.
I'm big on this. Which actually was genuinely funnier than I remember. Not in a laughing at way. Like I think it's actually funny.
I think it's funny too. Well, both to laugh at, but also to laugh with.
Yes. I mean, memes, but it's
almost
fine.
as bad as 2, unfortunately. Spider-Man 3 for myself, I do remember all of the hype that was surrounding this film. I remember seeing TV ads, posters, billboards, bus stations. Spider-Man 3 was everywhere when it was coming out. And of course, the most common place that I would see hype stuff for this movie was a Blockbuster, because at this point was when I was going to Blockbuster with Mom on a regular basis, and I would see posters for Spider-Man 3 all over the store. So the hype was big. Didn't see it in theaters, unfortunately. I did rent it from Blockbuster when it first came out on DVD, along with GMK and Godzilla Tokyo SOS. And I sat down and I watched Spider-Man 3, and I didn't get very much out of it, unfortunately. And that was it. That was the one time I watched it for another year and a half. This was definitely the longest Spider-Man movie that my dad took to get on DVD, because it was early 2009, actually, when my dad got his hands on the DVD. I rewatched it with him there, and I enjoyed it a lot more. And it was around 2010 or 2011 or so when I started seeing various opinions on Spider-Man 3. Quick disclaimer, too. I've seen Spider-Man 1 and 2 many, many, many times. This is the one that I've definitely seen the least amount of times. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've only seen this about 15 times my entire life, spread out over 15 years. Because, yeah, this year is 15th anniversary of this movie.
Jeez.
As I've stated, this movie is much maligned. There are those that do really like this movie. And there are those that think it's okay, but they think it's the weakest of the trilogy. And there are those that despise this movie, say it's one of the worst superhero movies ever made, which to me is a massive exaggeration. Now, of those three, which one do you fall into, Ryan?
Honestly, this movie is really weird for me because I hadn't seen it more than like 2 or 3 times before this. I didn't really have a strong feeling about it. I remember there was a lot to the movie, which actually eventually, there you go, might lead into my pros at some point. But the idea that like so many villains in the movie and it's a crazy movie, I never had a problem with that. Um, so even going into this, I was like, I know I'm not gonna hate this. Like it's it's also hard as we talk about the first one. I have so much nostalgia for it, but I mean, considering I wasn't really around for the hype, I never really was at the point where I was disappointed by it or anything.
Me myself, I fall into the love it category. This is my favorite of the Sam Raimi trilogy. It took a long time for me to really make that decision and figure out which one is my favorite. Now, as I've stated, all three films have their elements that balance each other out, so I just see them as one collective experience. But of all three Sam Raimi movies, this is the one that I do enjoy watching the most. I just think this is the one that has the most going for it. So yeah, this is my favorite of the trilogy.
Damn.
So Spider-Man 3, development of which began immediately after the release of Spider-Man 2. And at the time, this was the number one most expensive movie ever made, with a whopping $258 to $350 million budget in 2007 money.
Fuck.
The film takes place a few months after the events of Spider-Man 2. The film follows Peter Parker as he prepares for his future with Mary Jane Watson while facing three new villains. Uncle Ben's true killer, Flint Marko, who becomes Sandman after a freak accident. Harry Osborn, his former friend, who is now aware of Peter's identity and seeks to avenge his father. And Eddie Brock, a rival photographer who subsequently transforms into Venom. More on that later. Peter also faces his greatest challenge when he bonds with an extraterrestrial symbiote that increases his abilities but amplifies his anger and negative traits. The film was released on my birthday in 2007 and made a whopping $894.9 million in its box office run.
Holy
But
shit.
it was received by mixed opinion, or was received to mixed opinions. It was also the third highest grossing film of 2007 and the highest grossing Spider-Man movie until it was sadly surpassed by Spider-Man Far From Home in 2019. People praised the action sequences and visual effects, but were polarized over the plot, pacing, runtime, number of villains, and most notably, Venom. The perceived overcrowded narrative was later attributed to studio interference and creative differences between Sony, Sam Raimi, and Avi Arad, an executive producer on this. A revised version of the film called Spider-Man 3 editor's cut was released on home entertainment and digital download in 2017, which I have not seen. I don't know how much of a difference there is, but it doesn't seem like it's not that much longer. This movie's 2 hours and 19 minutes. So from what I've heard, it's maybe like 2 hours and 25.
It's actually shorter by 2 minutes. It's
Oh.
basically, I haven't seen it either, but when I read about it, they used alternate versions of some scenes. They they cut a couple scenes, put a couple ones that weren't in the final film, and then they restructured the movie in editing. I'd be really interested to see it, but
and sadly, because of this movie's mixed response, Sam Raimi originally wanted to do 5 Spider-Man movies
no.
plus a Venom spinoff, but sadly, all of those plans got tossed in the shitter because of creative differences between Sam Raimi and Sony, unfortunately, leaving this series, at least to me, always having been left on kind of a painfully open end. But still, yeah, this is my favorite of the trilogy, and this is the one that I've been most excited to watch in this series and review. Anything else to add before we get to the plot?
Now that I'm thinking about it, when I was in kindergarten, I remember so many like backpacks and posters and things with like the black Spider-Man. That shit was everywhere. Like they had like the black suit and then they had like the normal suit. God, I must have had so much shit from that movie. Just thinking back. But
So
yeah, I was gonna say this. I found out that who's the producer? Ari
Avi Arad.
Yeah, Avi Arad. Okay, he was the one that wanted Venom in the movie, and then the studio wanted Gwen Stacy in the movie. I found this out. Continue.
So with all that being said, well, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Dr. Pepper Zero this time. Alrighty. Let's get into the plot of Spider-Man 3. A year after Otto Octavius's demise, the best villain from the shittiest Indiana Jones movie, Jackie Boy, Peter Parker plans to propose to Mary Jane Watson, who has made her Broadway musical debut. In Central Park, a meteorite lands near the two, and an extraterrestrial symbiote follows Peter to his apartment by attaching to his motorbike. Peter's former best friend, Harry Osborn, now going crazy over the fact that Peter is Spider-Man, seeks to avenge his father's death. Using his father's performance-enhancing gas and Green Goblin technology, he battles Peter to an eventual stalemate, which gives him a case of partial amnesia, making him think Peter is not Spider-Man. Meanwhile, police pursue escaped convict Flint Marko, who visits his wife and sick daughter before fleeing. What do you think's wrong with his daughter? Do you think she has cancer or just some kind of debilitating disease?
I mean, she's on like oxygen, so it could be like some lung shit. They never really go over that. I don't know anything about the comics either. So
Falling into an experimental particle accelerator that fuses his body with surrounding sand, he gains the ability to control and reform his body with sand, becoming, of course, Sandman. During a festival honoring Spider-Man for saving Gwen Stacy's life, played by Bryce Dallas Howard.
yep, before Jurassic World.
By the way, Flint Marko being played by Thomas Hayden Church, the only movie that I've ever seen him in. Playing the Spider-Man theme, by the way. Peter kisses her to please the crowd, which angers Mary Jane. What the hell were you expecting, dumbass?
I know, what the fuck. I'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Marko then robs an armored truck and escapes after defeating Spider-Man. NYPD Captain George Stacy, Gwen's father, informs Peter and his Aunt May, again played by... why do I always forget her name?
Isn't it like Rose something? I forget.
Fuck. God damn it. What is her name? Rosemary Harris. That's what it is.
I was right.
There's so many characters in this.
No, there's not.
Characters to talk about. Oh yeah. That they inform Peter and his Aunt May that Marco is Uncle Ben's true killer. The deceased Dennis Carradine was Marco's accomplice, the guy who fell out the window in the first film. At his apartment, as Peter sleeps in his Spider-Man suit in the shittiest apartment that you can ever imagine, while waiting for Marco to come out of hiding, the symbiote assimilates the suit. Peter awakens on top of a building and discovering that the symbiote has colored his suit black and enhanced his powers. However, it also brings out darker parts of his personality and birthing the famous black spider suit. Disclaimer, my favorite spider suit.
Birthing.
Fourth. Spider-Man locates and battles Marco in a subway tunnel, and discovering that water is Sandman's weakness, he opens a giant pipe, releasing a torrent of water that reduces Marco to mud and washes him away. Peter's changed comportment alienate... What? Why not just say personality? Alienates Mary Jane, who also received negative reviews from critics for her Broadway performance. She shares a tender moment with Harry, but leaves in regret. Urged by a hallucination of his father, Harry recovers from his amnesia and forces Mary Jane to break up with Peter. Harry later meets up with Peter and tells him that Mary Jane loves him. Under the influence of the symbiote, Peter confronts Harry and spitefully claims that his father never loved him. As Peter leaves after an ensuing fight, Harry throws a pumpkin bomb, but Peter deflects it back, disfiguring Harry's face.
You gonna cry?
Huh?
Are you gonna cry?
Stings, doesn't it? At the Daily Bugle, Peter exposes rival photographer Eddie Brock, played by Topher Grace. Why?
Wait, that was Eddie Brock? Wow.
What?
I'm joking. He said that was Eddie Brock?
Whose fake photos incriminate Spider-Man. Publisher J. Jonah Jameson, again played by J.K. Simmons, fires Brock and promotes Peter to staff photographer. Finally, Jesus. Later, Peter brings Gwen to a jazz club where Mary Jane now works. In an attempt to make her jealous, Peter interrupts Mary Jane's performance and dances with Gwen in front of her. Check this out. Gwen, realizing this, apologizes to Mary Jane and leaves after assaulting the bath. Fuck that scene. After assaulting the bouncers and accidentally smacking Mary Jane, Peter realizes that the symbiote is corrupting him. Retreating to a church's bell tower and realizing the sounds of clanging metal weaken the creature, Peter removes the symbiote. Brock, who is at the same church, becomes the symbiote's new host as Venom. Brock locates a still living Marco and convinces him to join forces to kill Spider-Man. Brock abducts Mary Jane and holds her captive from a web at a construction site, intending to kill her in revenge for Peter ruining him like a pansy-ass pussy. While Marco keeps the police at bay. After Harry declines to help Peter, Harry's butler reveals that Norman's death was not Spider-Man's fault. While Brock and Marco pin Peter down, Harry arrives to help Peter and save Mary Jane. Brock attempts to impale Peter with Harry's glider, but Harry jumps in and is impaled instead, like father, like son. Peter, remembering the symbiote's weakness to sound, assembles a perimeter of metal pipes to create a sonic trap, weakening it and allowing Peter to separate Brock from the symbiote. Peter activates a pumpkin bomb and throws it at the hostless symbiote, but Brock, having become addicted to its influence, attempts to save the symbiote, and both are vaporized. Marco explains that Ben's death was an accident that has haunted him and that everything he has done was to help his daughter. Peter forgives Marco, allowing him to escape. Peter and Harry reconcile before Harry dies from his injuries, again, like father, like son. Sometime later, Peter visits Mary Jane at the jazz club. They embrace and share a dance, ending the trilogy on a
Perfect note.
almost unsatisfying note. Just like,
Oh my
there's more
God.
that could be done.
Maybe.
So, what do you think of this plot?
Well, I guess I don't want to go too crazy because of my pros and cons, but I actually really like the plot of this movie for two main reasons. One, I like how batshit crazy they went with it, but also B, even though there's a couple things I really don't like, B, I think it actually ties together the three films really well. I think it makes a lot of references to especially the first movie in a way that I think ties it together really well. I feel like there's no better place to mention it than here. Like, obviously, it's kind of the end of Harry, Peter, and Mary Jane, which is kind of the relationship that the three films are pretty much backboned by. And the other couple other details, like it ends in a cemetery, like the first movie did. That was always an interesting thing to me. I don't know. I think it just works as a final film, and it's also very entertaining. But actually, upon looking back, I feel like there's not as much action as I remember, or maybe it's because the movie's so long that in comparison, the action doesn't feel like it takes up more.
I think that's it. Even though it's not much longer than the first one's 2 hours and 1 minute. The second one's 2 hours and 7 minutes, whereas this one's 2 hours and 19. But you are right. The action is a bit more evenly spread out throughout the film.
Yep. But no, overall, I really like the plot of this movie. I think it's actually, in some ways, a strong point and a weak.
I agree. This plot's very busy. There's a lot of shit that they threw into this movie's plot. And like Ryan says, it's batshit crazy. But I love it. That's one thing I love about this movie. I'll save it for later, but you can tell Sam Raimi was very ambitious with this film. They were throwing so many ideas into this movie, and they wanted to cram as much shit as they could into this.
Well, he was more forced to deal with an ambitious situation, but he took it in stride, you know.
Well, yeah, you are right. There was a lot of stuff that the studio wanted to do, but I still get the feeling Sam Raimi was really trying to be firing off on all cylinders, and I think it shows. They just wanted to make a big, epic, bombastic movie, and for the most part, I think they pull it off. I don't think it perfectly ends the series, in my opinion, especially knowing that there was supposed to be more. This movie's ending always just falls a tad bit short for my taste, but still, as a third and final installment, they wanted to end it with a bang, and I think they certainly did.
Yeah.
So how many pros you got? I have 9.
I have 7.
You can go first.
All right. The first one, I'll just get this out of the way because we kind of already said it. I like the crazy plot. I like the ambition. Though the execution I will get to maybe later. I think the idea, of the movie of cramming all of this in. I think, considering how many things that Raimi wanted to / had to put in the movie, it all kind of works pretty well for the most part. And it's I think the one thing that, because again I said this in our video for one, that like the ending of two, it's like this world ending, whatever the hell it was, not a black hole, but whatever the fuck it was. Like that seems like that should be the last thing, but because they had so many villains in this, it kind of tops that a little bit. And I don't know. I think the amount of things that they did to like reference the other films to like make callbacks, as well as to obviously address things in the first film, like okay, let's have the Sandman villain. Okay, that works because we're trying to tie back the Uncle Ben thing. That's a really good ending for Peter's kind of thing there. Um, and then obviously Harry's a great villain to have because of everything that's been building up. Although Venom is thrown in there and Gwen Stacy's thrown in there, they kind of relate to each other. And I think it helps to amp up all the shit going on with Harry. So I think they kind of made it work, and it was pretty entertaining for the most part. Do you have anything to say before I move on?
No, because the ambition's one of my pros too, but I want to save it.
Cool. My next one, which was, I mean, I knew it was going to be on here before I even watched it, but especially this one is the score, because the old theme,
yeah.
the old theme comes back in the opening credit. This has got to be one of the best opening credits themes ever in these movies. It's great. It really gets you hyped up. Especially like it's even better than like the Marvel theme. Like for the MCU movies when like they have the Marvel logo, I prefer the Danny Elfman theme for that.
As do I.
But then obviously the black suit Spider-Man theme is in this movie, and I really like that one. It's got like a.
I love it too.
It's got like a little bit of like a mischievous like vibe to it. Like, oh, okay, it's I think it fits really really well with Peter's character in that. It's good music, and Danny Elfman's awesome.
It actually was not Danny Elfman who scored this movie.
Oh shit! Really?
Well, they reuse a lot of Danny Elfman music, but this movie was scored by a guy named Christopher Young, and I think he's the one who did the Sandman theme too, as well as the Black Suit Spider-Man theme.
There you go. Nice.
That's all I'll say. It's really fucking great, but continue.
I was trying to think of a better way to describe that. Mischievous. Yeah, that kind of works. It's a little like mysterious, sort of like, I don't know, out of this world. I mean, it's an alien, so fuck, whatever. I really like that. Yeah, there you go. I thought it was a strong point. And my next pro is the villains. Now, I mainly say that my initial note was going to be Sandman as a pro. But then I was like, well, I do really like Harry, but I don't really love Venom, but I'll just put villains because I do really like Harry. I think Sandman, me and my brother, because my brother watched part of this with me. Sandman is like probably the villain with the most wasted potential. I don't think he's given as much screen time as he should have, because he's a villain that like very explicitly from the beginning he's super sympathetic. He's kind of
like Spider-Man Freeze.
He has this sort of attitude throughout the movie, like he's kind of just like bewildered, like he doesn't want any involvement in anything. He's like, I just need to do this, and I'm not trying to get in anybody's way, and I just don't want to be involved. I didn't even mean to shoot a guy. Like it's that whole. I think he's a really well character and concept. I just wish there was a little more of him. But it's really great how they tie it with Uncle Ben, and fuck. All that zero sugar coming out. You just burped nothing. Okay. But yeah, obviously anybody's going to be sympathetic for somebody trying to pay for their daughter to not be sick. So I think it's just a well thought out villain. And
like
then
Mr. Freeze.
Yes. And as far as Harry goes, it's pretty self-explanatory. Only gripe I have with Harry in the whole series is that like obviously he never believes Peter anytime he's like, and Peter's at one point when he's black suit, he's like, I'm done explaining it to you. And I really hate the stupid thing where the old guy is like, I'm going to tell you this now. because we need it in the movie. Your dad
Oh,
died
yeah.
by his own hand. Like, God, dude, you could have said that 5 fucking years ago.
Yeah, agreed.
Or I guess maybe he discovered it later, but still, could have found out in Spider-Man 2. But besides that, I think the idea that Harry's a villain is interesting. So I think that's well done. My next pro. I really like the acting in this movie. I think the performances are good. I don't think the script is weak in terms of like dialogue or anything, so that's not never a problem. But I mean, everybody's
No, there's
believable.
not really any cringy lines from the first one and a little bit of two.
Yeah. Unless it's very purposeful, like with emo Spider-Man. But you know, like everybody in this movie is very believable. That's probably the best compliment you can give to
Thanks,
acting.
Hot Legs.
Sandman is great. Even Topher Grace isn't bad. He's just very miscast, but like, you still believe he is that character.
What about that amazing night that we had? We had a coffee, Eddie. And really nothing? Nothing? Thanks, Hot Legs.
Okay, they could have come up with a better line than "I like being bad."
It makes me happy.
Besides that,
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
Oh my God,
You're
very
so
unintimidating.
I am thinking. Yeah, he's Miss Cat. Oh, Jesus Christ! Don't even.
We'll get to that. But yeah, all the performances great. I think Tobey Maguire is awesome. I think James Franco is great. Fucking the guy who plays Sandman, I don't fucking know.
Thomas Hayden Church. No, that's not Thomas Hayden Church. Or is it?
It is.
Yeah, it is. Thomas Hayden Church.
He's great. Obviously, J.K. Simmons is fucking awesome in the little bit he has in this movie. Sorry. And Aunt May, again, is great. She's a very, very believable character, though I think she also is not in this movie enough. The point is, the performances are all good, and I believe them. My fifth?
I think so.
Yeah, my fifth. My
Real
fifth of
quick,
7.
speaking of Aunt May, I think her best scene in this movie. Actually, no. Her first scene when she's telling the story of when Uncle Ben asked her to marry him. Excuse me. That's oddly just been one of my favorite scenes. It's a very because everyone's had those times where you just sit down and you have a grandma or an older aunt and you just have a conversation with them, and it's very warm and loving.
She's like, yeah, back
with me. It's sweet.
Back in the day, yeah, no, I agree with that. And she's making like coffee or tea or something. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's tea. And also the scene when she says, never have revenge in your heart. It can poison you and eventually turn you into something ugly.
Oh,
words to aspire to this day.
She fucking knows he's Spider-Man, so he literally is telling her, "Oh, I murdered that guy."
Okay. Especially with this one, do you really think that she knows that he's Spider-Man?
I think she did by the last movie. There was that whole scene where she was like, I remember she was outside and talking about like something about Spider-Man. It's all very convenient how she has all this perfect advice for him in this movie and the last one. But anyway.
I think in this one, she may not have known 100%, but I definitely think she was really starting to suspect that he's Spider-Man.
Hey, Sandman, that guy we just learned about, he's dead. Anyway, I like the action and the fight scenes in the movie. Oh, that was gross. It sounded like a motorboat. Oh, I'm saving that. But although that's going in something. Although I think like the Venom fight, obviously, if they would have saved Venom for a fucking better movie, could have been so much better. It was cool to see like at least 5 or 6 frames of them web fighting. The ending is good though. Like there's a lot going on. the ending fight is pretty well choreographed. There's only like one moment where my realist movie brain is like, okay, Venom hasn't like attacked anybody in 2 minutes. Where is he? But there, that only happened like once. And then obviously the opening fight with the chase with Peter and Harry is probably the best in the movie.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, all of it's well done. I'm trying to think what else. Obviously, the train, subway, whatever that was, fight scene with Sandman, that was also great.
Sure.
Right. I mean, they just had like creative ways of doing things, as always. Like the first encounter with Sandman when he's in like the bank truck or whatever. You know, Peter's like surfing on that thing. It's just they always find really cool ways to make it more entertaining. So, I mean, I think compared to one, again, I didn't watch two. I didn't actually have time to do that. It's an improvement. I think this film does the action really well. My number 6. I think I'm trying to be fair with this one. Considering it was 2007, this movie is not as dated as other films are from that time. The budget definitely shows that the effects, for the most part, hold up. I think the only effects that actually don't work totally is some of the green screen and some of the CG in that first chase scene we just talked about. That's the only time where something was like ever like, all right, that's a little weird. Everything else pretty much looks great. I mean, especially the CGI for Sandman, which, you know, that shit's fucking awesome, and that totally holds up. I'm trying to think what other special effects. The symbiote stuff, that stuff looks really cool. Especially in the end when it just starts becoming like this big thing. That was really fucking cool. No complaints with the effects really. But I'm also being sympathetic because it is 15 years old. And my last one, I said this about the first one, the cinematography. I like how it's shot. I believe, I don't know if 2 does, but this one is shot widescreen. I don't know if 2 is as well, because the first one was shot like 185. This one was shot like anamorphic, super widescreen. I think it looks cool. It looks great. Just especially just because I skipped 2, just seeing the difference between 1 and 3 in terms of quality. The film looks really great. I think a lot of this movie takes place in like the dead of night or just day. There's not a lot of like sunset, sunrise, which they did in the last couple movies, which I really liked. But overall, I think it's shot well, and I think that rounds out my 7.
All right, that's fair. Pro number 1 for me is once again Peter Parker. This is probably Tobey Maguire's best performance of the trilogy. He goes through a whole plethora, like with the second movie, where that's pretty much all of Peter's lowest points. This film showcases Peter's highest of highs. He's now finally with the girl of his dreams. The slander from J. Jonah Jameson is either just tolerable or it's significantly dropped off. He's got steady work. He's got a steady income. He's finding more of that balance in his life of being a hero and being a normal person. And he's just on cloud 9, and he's getting the key to the city because he saved the police captain's daughter. So shit's all going well for him at the beginning of this. But then it slowly starts to unravel because he's got so many villains coming his way. Also, the destruction of the relationship that he's wanted for so long by outside forces, and literally outside forces are coming in to try to destroy him, being the symbiote. But in the end, he still does it in his Spider-Man way. He manages to overcome all obstacles and come out on top. The ending is a bit bittersweet for him, but still overall. And he also comes to terms with the man who really killed the most important man in his life. And you see him be angry about it. But then you along with Peter, forgive Flint Marko for killing Uncle Ben, which is similar to another movie that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes. But Peter Parker's performance is fantastic in this. Toby really gave it his all, and I think it shows. Pro number 2 is Sandman. Sandman's never been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I don't know why. The movies always go with some of my least favorite Spider-Man villains. Like, where's Scorpion? Where's Tarantula? The next movie does Lizard, but these movies always go with my least favorites. But still,
Kraven, Kingpin, there's a shit ton of them.
I don't even like Kraven. Ugh. Although, if they do ever make a Spider-Man movie with Kraven and they don't cast Jason Momoa, I'll lose all faith in humanity. But Sandman, how he's demonstrated here, is spectacular. I consider this essentially to be like Marvel's version of Mr. Freeze. I've never considered Mr. Freeze to be a true villain. At worst, he's an anti-villain, but I think there's times where he is an anti-hero. He's not doing bad things just for the sake of being bad, at least not for the most part. He's committing crimes so he can save his wife. Here, Sandman's kind of similar. He's committing crimes because he wants to save his daughter. Anybody who's a parent can sympathize with that and think to themselves, would I really rob a bank just to save my child from dying of cancer? It's a good thing to think about. And Thomas Hayden Church does a really, really, really good job with his performance. It's like what Ryan says. He really gets the feeling that, he doesn't want to be a criminal. He doesn't want to be a bad person. He doesn't want to be involved with anyone's business. He just wants to get money so that he can save his daughter. Anybody can sympathize with that. And it's encapsulated by his line, "I'm not a bad person. I just have bad luck." Yeah, he does a great job. And this will lead me into my third pro, is once again the really good emotional moments. This mostly has to do with the ending. Actually, no, it has to do with the ending and whenever Peter and Flint Marko are in contact. Like when Peter finds out that Flint Marko is the true killer, of course, at first he's angry that he escaped and he's been out there without being punished all these years later. And you hear the anger and the rage in his voice when he's saying, "This guy killed my uncle and he's still out there." And when the two fight in the subway, like, you can really see the intensity and the hatred in Peter's body language, and you can hear it in his voice. Like, he's pissed. But then at the ending, when Sandman tells Peter what happened with his uncle, it's kind of similar. Are you a Harry Potter fan at all?
No.
Boy. It's kind of similar to when Harry finds out why Professor Snape has been the way he is the entire series. When you find out that Professor Snape has been looking out for Harry for the entire franchise, it makes you feel bad for hating the guy. And it also gives you a lot of sympathy for the character, too. It's similar here. Not quite as much because this has only kind of 2 movies behind it, but Sandman's only been in this one film, whereas Snape has been in the entire Harry Potter franchise up until Deathly Hallows Part 2. But it's similar, and it hits you like a sledgehammer to the gut. You're just like, oh, you poor guy. Probably the strongest of the whole trilogy in terms of emotional moments is Spider-Man 3. Let me get rid of that. Pro number 4 is Harry Osborn. Similar to Toby, James Franco probably gives his best performance in Spider-Man 3 of the whole trilogy, in my opinion. This is also his most involved role, whereas in the first one, he's kind of the sad, pathetic, daddy's got issues boy. In the second one, he's just a whiny trust fund brat. Here, though, he is a crazy, revenge-filled psychopath for a little bit. His fight scene with Peter, not to talk about the action real quick, but you can, again, see the anger and intensity in James Franco's performance. It is a little frustrating that Harry just absolutely refuses to listen to Peter. But it's like that in the comics too, so that's not specifically talking crap about the filmmakers here. It's in the comics as well. But it is believable that Harry is obviously very angry with Peter. His chemistry with Peter when he's got amnesia is very heartwarming. You can see that Harry is just acting like how he used to be. Peter and Harry are now best buds again, and all's right in the world. You despise Harry when he gets his memory back and he splits up Peter and Mary Jane, especially with that shit-eating grin on his face when he's in the cafe. He turns around and looks at Peter and gives him that. You just want to slap him across his face. It is also heartwarming when Harry comes to Peter's aid in the final fight. Like their team up dynamic duo chemistry is really, really strong, and watching these two take on Sandman and a little bit of Venom is a lot of fun. Just a shame that he dies, because I think had Harry and Spider-Man tag teamed Venom, that would have been cool. But still, oh, your light just turned off behind you.
Yeah, I know. It's a timed light.
Okay. Probably is better, though, because it was washing out your background. Yeah, James Franco is really, really at the top of his game in this movie. Best performance is Harry. He's great. I definitely do like him better as an ally to Spider-Man rather than a villain.
Yeah, I agree.
But as a villain, that first fight is pretty awesome. Actually, no, both their fights are pretty awesome. Pro number 5 is the ambition. To just quickly talk about this a little bit more, you can tell that the filmmakers were just throwing everything they could into this in order to make it work. They wanted to cram so much into this, and they wanted to showcase so much crap. I still do think, though, it works for the most part. It gets a little messy at times, but they had a shit ton of money to work with, so they're just like, you know what? Why not? We have $350 million at our disposal. We can do whatever the fuck we want. Let's do it. Let's do all this stuff. Let's do Venom. Let's do Sandman. Let's include Gwen Stacy. Let's include this and that and that and this, and be as batshit crazy Army of Darkness piece of shit movie as possible. But it's great. The ambition is really, really strong. Like you can feel it through the screen, and you kind of get wrapped up along with it, and you just feel like, yes, this movie is awesome. There's so much crap here to enjoy. It's great. There's kind of something for everybody here. Pro number 6 is the humor. Talking about J. Jonah Jameson for just a minute. He's not in this very much, sadly, but he probably has his funniest moments, at least in my opinion. Mr. Jameson, your wife just told me to keep the blood pressure down. Time to take her pill. Not that one. Not that one. Drink plenty of water. So you want a job? You want a job? Anyone else care about what I want? I do. Shut up. Get out.
Get out.
You know we're gonna have to print a retraction. Have a printer retraction in 20 years. Parker, where? I need a photographer. Hey, kid, you want a job? Why would I want a job? I'm just a kid. All right, well, how much for the camera? $100. $100? All right, you little crook. Here. What the hell? Films extra.
Yeah. Sam daughter.
What?
That's Sam Raimi's daughter.
Really?
Yeah, the camera girl.
Damn, I didn't know that. That's cute. So JJ is funny here, but the funniest shit in the whole movie is when emo Spider-Man is walking around checking out chicks left and right, putting on the clothes and dancing in the middle of the street and going to that fucking jazz club and saying, check this out. Oh, it's funnier than shit to me. It's cringy and it's stupid and it's retarded, but fuck me, is it funny?
It's great.
And it's really the music that sells it as being so funny because it's so over the top and goofy and ridiculous, but it's hilarious. It also, Peter Parker's facial expressions help too. You want the photos? I'll take a staff job. Double the money.
It's so rapid fire too. It's like just jumping all over the place. And the fucking stupid cut with the door. He's going to get dressed and the door just comes right back open.
Oh, it's funny. Some of the funniest shit in any fucking superhero movie I've ever seen. Like,
it's
Deadpool and Deadpool 2 have nothing on this. Fucking A, is this movie funny.
And props to Tobey Maguire too, because he's like a totally different person.
Even more goes to show that this is Tobey's best performance of the trilogy.
Why the haircut though? It's so out of nowhere ridiculous.
Wait, when does he get a haircut?
No, not the haircut, but the hairstyle. Like
oh, like having some hair over his eyes to look emo. I'd be really interested to listen to this movie's commentary so I can hear Tobey's what he has to say about all those parts.
He's probably done. He's probably done talking about it.
Oh yeah, this movie's funny. This is easily the funniest of the whole series. Honestly, it also kind of is one of the funniest superhero films I've ever seen. And that's another thing I like about this movie. I think it's even like the first movie is a perfect blend of being, it's not campy, but it's fun, but it also takes itself seriously when it has to. This movie is a perfect blend of taking itself seriously, but this one is definitely the campy one. It's kind of self-aware at times. Hey, we have $350 million to work with. Let's have a few goofy scenes just for the hell of it. And I think it's great.
I think they also, with Jameson, I think they realize, like, all right, we're just going to film a comedy with this. Because, like, that's what people liked about the first two. And, you know, he had a lot more to do in the second one. But it's like, let's just make this pill scene the most hilarious shit ever.
Oh, that's funny. Let's see. Pro number 7 is the music score. The music score done by Christopher Young. Oh, that's cute. Tobey Maguire greeting fans at the premiere in Queens, New York. That's cute. So what has Christopher Young done? Christopher Young. He's done Hellraiser, Species, Urban Legend, The Grudge. Oh, I guess he's a horror movie guy. The Exorcism of Emily Rose, Drag Me to Hell, another Sam Raimi movie. Ooh, he did Sinister. Nice. Deliver Us from Evil, and the Pet Cemetery remake. Ugh. Oh, he also did the music for Ghost Rider, the Nicolas Cage movie. Oh, damn, he's old. He's 64. Well, not super old, but he's been around for a while. But I love the music in this. They do bring over a lot of Danny Elfman's themes from the first two, which is used at appropriate times. Like the Spider-Man theme is used effectively. It's almost the same music at the very beginning of the movie as it is the first film, but then they include the Christopher Young stuff. But the two scores don't clash. They sound like they were made by the same person, which they kind of were. But I like Ryan thought Danny Elfman again returned to do the music for this, but nope, it was somebody else. But the new music done by Christopher oddly still kind of sounds like Danny Elfman music. The Sandman theme is awesome. That's my favorite piece of music done for this movie. The Black Suit Spider-Man music is also really good. And the Venom music is also done really good too. But the Sandman music is my favorite. Not a whole lot to say other than it's awesome. Probably my favorite score of the whole trilogy. It's big, it's epic, it's bombastic, it's sweet when it needs to be, it's emotional when it needs to be, but also gets your blood flowing and your heart pumping, and gets you excited at the best of times. Fuck, my nose itches. Pro number 8 is the action scenes are fucking awesome. We have 2 fights between Peter and Harry. 2 fights between Spider-Man and Sandman, and the entire 25 minutes of this movie is one big long action scene. Spider-Man versus Venom, then Spider-Man versus Sandman, and then Harry and Spider-Man versus Venom and Sandman. It's awesome. And then it finally ends with Spider-Man defeating Venom in a big explosion. It's fucking great. There's a ton of action in this. It is more evenly sprinkled out throughout the film, and there are a few a lot of the action scenes are fairly short. Like both fights with Sandman are kind of short, and Peter's second fight with Harry is a little short, but they're hard hitting, they're quickly paced, they're well edited, they're very well choreographed. And they're really exciting and kick ass and filled with a couple good one-liners. How'd you like that, Spidey? That all you got? Stings, doesn't it? Protected you in high school. Now I'm gonna kick your little ass. Ooh. Hey, Pete, am I interrupting? It's good that you came. Or what was that line? Aren't you happy I came? Well, a couple minutes ago wouldn't have been so bad either. I'm going to need a hand with this. I'm a little busy right now. That's about it.
I still think the best line in the movie is, "See ya, chump." What the hell?
Ooh, yeah, man. Hey, love the new outfit. This is totally what I need to scoop Parker. Give me some of that web action. Crash. See ya, chump. What the hell?
Tobey Maguire is the perfect voice for Spider-Man. Oh
Agreed. Yeah.
Good riddance.
I guess you haven't heard. I'm the sheriff around these parts. Okay. The fight scenes and the action is absolutely spectacular.
Wait, one more. They love me.
Oh, another one too. Last one. Hate those things. Those things are dickheads, to quote Meadow, as we rewatched it together. The bladed pumpkin bombs. Hate those things. Those things are dickheads. And pro number 9 is the special effects are phenomenal across the board. Again, $350 million. They used it well. All the CGI looks top notch. None of it looks dated. None of it looks aged. Sandman, like when he's in his sandstorm form, phenomenal. And when he is first born, like when he's just that humanoid sand figure, sure, it does technically look a little cartoony, but I think that adds to its benefit. It looks appropriately cartoony because it's a man made out of sand. I think that works to its benefit. And it's nice that you can see like little individual pieces of sand moving all around him at all times. I think that's a really nice added detail. And when Sandman morphs himself into his various forms, like his enlarged fists, like when he turns his fist into a hammer, when he's a giant Sandman, screaming Godzilla 1998 roars during the trailer because Sony. He looks really, really good. Oh yeah, watch the trailer when he is the giant Sandman and he blows away all the cops with sand during the trailer. You can hear Godzilla 1998 roars because Sony. And when he's the super giant Sandman at the end of the movie, he looks phenomenal. He's very well detailed, very well animated. Like you can see his eyes moving around. You can see like little cinder blocks and tires and debris along morphed into his body. Sandman looks phenomenal. Effects wise, I suppose Venom does look good.
Yeah.
Not much to say about that. Just overall, the special effects are absolutely stellar. I actually do agree that there are a couple shoddy green screen effects during Peter and Harry's first fight, but they're quick, so I just don't focus on them. I just enjoy the fight. Yeah, the effects are phenomenal. Not much room to complain. $350 million was definitely spent well.
Yeah.
So, with all these great things to say about this, I have 4 nitpicks and 2 major cons.
I
What do you
have
have?
I have just 3 straight cons.
Go first.
All right. Okay, this one might actually surprise you. My first con is Peter Parker. I think Peter's just an asshole in this movie. Like, there is one scene where Mary Jane is genuinely just being a dumb bitch. But other than that, like, he's just a dick. I mean, like, what he did with, like, Gwen Stacy on the Spider-Man day, like, I don't know, it's horrible. And, like, oh, everything's going right from in the beginning of the movie, but it just makes him, like, really cocky, and I wasn't a fan of that. Um, I just I just felt like, and I felt like the symbiote thing was just insult to injury at that point, and it just made things way worse. Um, I don't know. I just liked his portrayal better, especially in the second one, but the first one too. Um, and while we're on cons of characters, Eddie Brock, it's it, it's just not Eddie Brock. Like, like isn't Eddie supposed to be like this bodybuilder, like kind of intimidating guy? Doesn't he go to high school with Peter? Or am I just thinking of the animated show? I can't.
That's Flash.
Okay, no, really I thought no, I know Flash Gordon. I thought
Flash
Flash
Thompson.
Thompson. God, um, I thought.
Although it is kind of confusing because Flash did also become Venom at some point in the comics too.
Geez. Actually, I noticed that he was at Harry's funeral at the end of this movie. The actor who played yeah, I didn't realize that, but I saw it this time.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, and every other medium I've seen Venom, he's supposed to be like intimidating. Like, I'm pretty sure, especially in the animated series, like Venom wasn't always like he didn't always uh he wasn't like the super or the most bad character. Like he would, talk to Peter sometimes, but like he's just a dick. Like he's supposed to be like this like intimidating asshole kind of villain, but in this movie he's just kind of a sad, whiny
Wimp.
guy. Yeah, I mean, and especially like when Peter got the symbiote, it just made his suit black, and when this Eddie guy gets it. He's all of a sudden more buff than Peter. Like, I don't get that at all. It just didn't work. It was really horrible. So anyway, enough with Eddie Brock. My final con is the pacing. I think this movie is actually paced too quickly. I think
Maybe a little bit.
They easily could have added like another 5 or 10 minutes to let some scenes sit a little more. I can't pinpoint it now, but there was a lot of abrupt transitions. And obviously they're going back and forth because they have a bunch of stories to follow at the same time. I just found a lot of the scenes didn't feel, I don't know, it felt a little rushed. Which again, I said that the crazy plot is a pro, which I agree with that, but I think if they would have let it sit longer, if they had given it more time, it would have really excelled in that way, where I feel like a lot of it felt kind of rushed. Like scenes would go by where it's like, okay, yeah, the purpose of this scene is to make Peter blah, blah, blah. All right, cut, next thing. You know, it didn't feel as natural to me as the other ones did. But other than those couple things, that's really all I had to say bad about it. So I guess I could lump pacing in with editing a bit, if you want to make a fourth one. But
My first nitpick, to kind of come off what Ryan was just talking about, I do think this movie is a bit too short. Because the plot is so batshit crazy, and because there's so much stuff they want to put in here, and because the pacing is pretty quick, I just feel like had this movie been a bit longer, it wouldn't have felt so kind of rushed, and it wouldn't have felt so cluttered. Not by a whole lot. I think if they made this an even 2.5 hours long, it would have been better. Like there would have been just a little bit more room to breathe, a little bit more room to play with. But as it currently stands, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some. Well, I mean, obviously, if there is the editor's cut, why couldn't they just leave the movie as it currently is, but just add those longer scenes? Probably would have flowed along a bit better. But yeah, I agree somewhat. I just think the film is a bit too short. Nitpick number 2, Gwen Stacy's inclusion in this is pointless.
yeah.
Other than A, to make Mary Jane jealous, but also for just some contrived reason to give Peter the key to the city. And then outside of that, she just kind of feels, it feels like a star vehicle project to showcase Bryce Dallas Howard, because she was kind of new at the time, but also to maybe plant a future relationship for Peter in a future sequel, but that never came to be. So in the end, her inclusion just feels kind of pointless, other than just to show everybody to the world, hey, here's young, hot Bryce Dallas Howard. Remember her dad, Ron Howard? Here's his daughter. Nitpick number 3 is Peter and MJ's relationship is garbage. They go through so much, or at least Peter does, go through so much shit in the last movie in order to finally land MJ. And then it kind of seems like left and right, he's kind of self-sabotaging himself. Every opportunity he gets, like he refuses really. There's one scene when MJ is throwing a fit about her review, and Peter is really trying to say, look, hey, you can't let negative criticism get to you. You just have to take it in stride and move on, and then be constructive about it. Try to improve yourself, but don't throw a fit. That scene, she's just acting like, that's not what I want to hear.
Yes, that's the scene I'm talking about.
But other than that, it kind of seems like Pete is just self-sabotaging his relationship, kissing Gwen, making everything about him, smacking MJ across the face, just dancing with Gwen to make her jealous. Yeah, his relationship with MJ is just kind of dog shit in this movie. And nitpick number 4, this is kind of something I mentioned earlier. I don't much care for the ending. to me, especially knowing that there was supposed to be more films, it doesn't really end on a satisfying note. It just feels a bit too open-ended for me. Like, we know that, well, obviously there's more to come, but nothing ever came, so what the fuck? Maybe with the success of No Way Home, maybe Sony will give us a fourth film in this series and just go to Sam and just say, "Hey, we're sorry. Do you want to come back and make a fourth one?" Who knows? I know that Toby has stated that he's down for returning for a part 4, but that's only one person so far.
I found out that Raimi originally wanted Vulture in Spider-Man 3, but then eventually pushed that to the fourth film's plan after the studio interference.
I do also know that part 5 would have included Carnage, so maybe that would have been done better than Venom Let There Be Carnage. Minor spoiler. But obviously that never came to be, sadly.
Or also Felicia Hardy as Black Cat.
Ooh, that would have been nice. I've heard of that one too.
Played by Anne Hathaway. Didn't she play Catwoman?
Oh, yeah, because Jackie Boy mentioned that. That would not have been a good casting, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of Anne Hathaway.
Bruce Campbell as Mysterio. That would have been great. That was supposed to be like the opening scene of Spider-Man 4.
I hate Mysterio. Ugh.
Yeah, but he gets beat up and taken out early, so it's fine.
Moving on to my 2 cons. Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. God damn, is he miscast. I see what they're doing. They wanted to get somebody that looks a lot like Tobey Maguire, which Topher Grace does. The problem, though, he looks nothing like Eddie Brock from the comics. Not to sound like one of those comic purist dickheads, but in the comics, Eddie Brock is a completely different person. He's a big bodybuilder dude who can bench press 400 pounds. I think that concept was to create him literally as the antithesis of Peter Parker. Peter is skinny and short and small. Eddie Brock's big and tall and giant. Total opposite of Spider-Man. But Topher Grace does not look like Eddie Brock. He also doesn't really act like Eddie Brock, in my opinion, either. And his motivations for wanting to be bad are very, very fucking weak, in my opinion. Just because he gets exposed for trying to frame somebody, he goes into a church and he begs God to kill Peter Parker. To quote Meadow, who watched this with me the last time I rewatched it, it's extra. Like, that's a bit of a stretch. You get fired from a job and you start begging God to kill somebody. That's a bit melodramatic, wouldn't you say? But my second con is Venom. Don't really care for the design. He's too skinny. He's only barely buffer than Spider-Man. I don't like the claws because they stick out like literally a sore thumb. Don't much care for Venom's face. It's too small. His mouth doesn't open up wide enough, and his tongue is too short. That's a weird complaint, but it just looks like a way too streamlined version of Spider-Man. Because once again, Venom was created to be the antithesis of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is lean and skinny and scrawny. Venom is big, giant, and buff. But here, Venom only looks slightly larger than Spider-Man. And when they're swinging through the streets, he just looks like Black Suit Spider-Man. I also really don't like Venom's voice. It doesn't really sound like Venom. It just sounds like a very slightly distorted version of Topher Grace's voice. And they never speak in the third person. We are Venom. we like being bad. It makes us happy. Nothing like that. It just sounds like Topher Grace being Topher Grace. He also, Venom, aside from his design, he does feel pretty underused. He's literally only in the last 20 minutes. Now still, he does service a good, like, anti-Spider-Man. He's a good foe for Spider-Man to go up against. And Venom does kick the crap out of Spider-Man in a good way, though. And he does force Spider-Man to be a bit more witty and smart with how he fights Venom and using his resources to his advantage. But still, how Venom is handled here, he's definitely the weakest villain, both physicality-wise and just his placement in the story. He's definitely the weakest element, in my opinion, as well as Topher Grace being painfully miscast. So that's all I have to say. Final thoughts?
Overall, I think, my feelings about the movie are still a little complex because I feel like I would have loved to see more, but I also see how in a lot of ways this does wrap a lot of things up, namely Harry's whole story and the Uncle Ben story, which both kind of started everything. I think you're right in that it could have been a better ending. Some things are left a little meh, like Peter and MJ end with like the hug, which is fine, but like I hadn't seen this movie in a long time, so I didn't remember. I was expecting them to do the same way that they ended the first and second movie, I believe, with Peter just swinging around the city, continuing to be Spider-Man. That would have been a much better way to end it. But I kind of got what they were going for. Overall, I don't have as much nostalgia for this movie as I do the first one or the second one, but there's a lot of things wrong with it, but I think I was able to look at a lot of things I liked this time. You're right that there was a lot of humor in it, which was great. And I think they were very daring and ambitious with all the shit that they were trying to do. And of course, emo Peter. Yeah, overall, I think I would rank it as my least favorite. I actually think my ranking is 1, 2, 3. So there you go.
I can see a lot of reasons why people don't like this film, or at least not as much as the first two. And I can see why, because I was initially going to say that the studio interference was either a nitpick or a con. I do agree with some of the studio interference. And funny enough, this movie, whenever people talked about movies that were ruined by studio interference, this was probably the biggest example for a long time until Justice League came around. You can't deny, like, the whole fiasco with Justice League makes this movie look tame. Makes it look like a normal production, honestly. But I can see a lot of the criticisms that people may have with this. But in the end, every time I watch this movie, I just enjoy it more and more and more. It is my favorite of the trilogy. It has the most stuff that I like in my superhero stuff. And I love the ambition. I love the fight scenes. I love the humor. I just love Spider-Man 3. It may be a flawed film, unfortunately, but it really was Sam Raimi firing off on all cylinders. And I really can't be mad at him for that. So, what's your rating for this? You rated the first movie objectively 4, but personally 5. What do you rate 2, real quick?
I would really have to rewatch 2. I think 2, I'd probably say objectively it's like a 4.5, and I probably rate it as a 4.5.
Okay.
With this one, Personally, I give it a 4, but objectively, I might give it a 3 out of 5 or a 3.5 out of 5. Like, I can see how many obvious problems there are with the movie, but as a fan and acknowledging what they did well, I can't help but to really enjoy it, and I had a good time watching it.
Alrighty. I'm going to give this a perfect 10. I love this movie. I don't really give a shit when anybody says Spider-Man 3 kicks a lot of ass. Sony, please give us a fourth one.
I'd watch it.
I would watch the fuck out of it. Ryan, anything to plug?
No, but it appears that there's a little bit more MonsterVerse news now, so maybe I'll be making something soon. I'll have a little bit of time on my hands coming up that I might be able to throw a video or two together. So stay tuned on the channel for something soon. Me and Sean might do a stream. We were planning on doing one maybe this week, and then we didn't end up getting to because I was busy and he ended up getting sick, so it kind of worked out. But we're probably going to do a stream soon. So look out for that as well.
Look forward to only one video next week, where I will be tackling the kind of, well, not really forgotten, but just the one Spider-Man movie that just not a lot of people talk about. Was it 2012? I think it was 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I look forward to that. And as always, go out and if you're in a committed relationship, even if you're a superhero, don't kiss another girl. What the fuck is wrong with you? And I will see you guys in the next video.